Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to let you all sit down. Although I am one that for every minute that you overrun coming in, I get 10 more minutes to speak. So do be aware of that. Has anyone seen me speak before? Yeah, we'll lock the door so you can't get out. We do. That will be a thing that we do. So, what am I, and why am I here? A lot of you sitting here thinking he looks like some kind of beardy nerd who may be about to give us a load of stats. And yes, I am a beardy nerd who's about to give you a load of stats, so congratulations. However, I'm going to try and make them reasonably digestible, because what I'm going to try and do is lay out the state of the graduate labour market as it stands right now, and talk to you a little bit about how data's captured in a non-technical way, in a practical way, and help you understand the contours and the shapes of recruitment over the next 12 months or so. Who am I? I'm the head of labour market intelligence at Jisc. What does that actually mean? Well, I'm the higher education sector's tame labour market nerd. My job is to know where the graduates are, what they're doing, and how they got there. And I'm going to try and help you with some of the insights that I've learned over that. I've been doing this job for over 20 years. I know you're looking at me and thinking, can't be much over 30. But actually, I'm a bit older than that. So I've been doing this for a while, and I've amassed a little bit of expertise, and I'm hoping to share it with you today. Right, so let's talk about the workforce in general, just to set out our stall. As of the end of 2023, this data is collected every year by the Office of National Statistics. We'll get data for 24 in April. At the end of 2023, there are about 16.9 million people in the UK with degrees or equivalent. When we say degree or equivalent, we actually do mean 18 plus formal education. So that does mean people who've been to college and so on. So it means lots of people with foundation degrees and HNDs and diplomas, as well as first degree graduates. But the majority of the workforce now has formal post-18 education in the UK. That's been the case since COVID. It isn't going back. In fact, actually, less than half the population has these qualifications, but because this group of workers is much more likely to be employed, most of the workforce now has a degree or equivalent. And at the same time, about 17.3 million people are employed in professional level jobs. Now, I'm not going to use the phrase graduate jobs here, except in the bits later in the presentation where I forgot I was going to say that, because we don't have a formal definition of what a graduate job is. What instead we use is a formulation devised by the Office of National Statistics, professional level based on occupational classification codes. I'm not going to go into that into great detail, fortunately for you, because I could talk about it for literally hours. What you do need to know is that effectively, there's a small group of people at the Office of National Statistics who decide what fall into professional and non-professional job categories. And they've got one person from higher education who basically decides what a graduate job is. So if you've ever got any questions about that, you need to ask that person, and that person is me. Who decides what a graduate job is, if you've ever wondered that? It's me. I do. And so all the bits about that debate you like, I did. And if there are any bits you don't like, I'm trying to fix them, so do bear with me. It might take a while. In 2023, in this particular year, the number of people working in graduate employment went up by about 750,000, which is more than the number of leavers from university. So 2023, we saw quite a lot of immigration because we needed those people in order to fill those graduate level jobs. Jobs below degree level fell by about 414,000. And as you'll see later on, that's a persistent trend in the UK. It is a long-term, year-on-year trend. The graduate labour market gets bigger every year, and the non-graduate labour market shrinks every year. That's been the case for 25 years or so. And that will be the case this year, and it will be the case next year, and it will be the case every year. That's the simple fact of it. Actually, our issue in the UK, we do have a substantial overqualification problem. So about 14.5%, about 1 in 7 of the workforce are in jobs that don't match their qualification, or in jobs that are not up to their level of qualification. A minority, but a large minority of those are graduates in non-graduate jobs, but actually it's more of an issue that we have lots of people who've got good GCSEs and A-levels who are in jobs that don't require those. What's more of an issue in the UK, actually, though, and that's unusually for a developed nation, the overqualification problem is about standard for a developed nation. The underqualification problem is much more serious. About 1 in 4 UK workers don't have the qualifications they need to do their jobs effectively. And actually, the largest group of those are in management. And so, obviously, this won't apply to any of you, but there are a lot of people in management in the UK who can't do their jobs properly. And we can prove it with graphs. It doesn't apply for any of you, but it does obviously apply to other people elsewhere in the economy. And you can probably think of a few examples of senior people in the UK who are completely unable to do their jobs effectively. I make no comment about that other than that. We collect data on graduate outcomes every year, and sometimes when we're doing them, we even get the actual labels the right size. But what we do every year is 15 months after graduation, we collect data from all people who leave university and find out what they're doing. This is first degree graduates, UK domiciled first degree graduates from 2021-22. In fact, we publish all of this for free in a publication called What Do Graduates Do that my colleagues at Prospects will be able to tell you a great deal about, because Jisc is the parent organisation of Prospects. I work very closely with our Prospects colleagues. We've got the stand out there. What do graduates do? It's all free. We have it at subject level, so you can see what mechanical engineers and mathematicians and English graduates and all of these people did with their qualifications. The reason why I'm showing you this data is firstly to tell you this data is collected in an extremely systematic way and has been collected since the 1950s. So we have more data on graduates than any other country in the world. Well, secondly, because this cohort of graduates, and they were surveyed at the end of 2023, takes a couple of months, 2-3 months, slightly longer, to collate all that data. So we've just surveyed the next cohort of graduates. We surveyed them in the winter. We'll be getting that data out in early summer. I wouldn't expect the data to look very different, because this was actually a pretty typical year for graduates. Most graduates go and start working full-time. Working and studying, that group are also all working full-time, but they're taking qualifications, often professional qualifications. So they're often doing training schemes, and they're often taking, for example, their accountancy or their architecture or their qualifying exams in professions. And the further studies are back in university, usually, doing things like masters and teaching qualifications and sometimes PhDs. The working part-time is split because we've got a definition of part-time, and at the moment the definition of part-time for the the International Labour Organisation is 30 hours a week. So that means anybody on, for example, a new 4-day-a-week working trials will be counted as part-time workers. We may need to look at that in the future, but we're seeing, although most of the graduates in that group want extra hours, a substantial minority don't and have specifically sought out that work. So we have to be careful about saying whether that's good or not, basically, whether that's a good outcome or not, because for some people it is and some people it isn't. But that's a pretty typical year. About 80% of graduates are either are employed straight after graduating. 17% are in further study. About 5.6% were unemployed. Generally, anything below 6% is a reasonable graduate employment year. I would expect this year's graduates, the ones who graduate this summer, to graduate into a slightly more difficult labour market, possibly over 6%. Don't think it'll get to 7%. 7% is recession, is the point at which we get recessions. But that's what you'd normally see in a normal graduate year, and that's what we're going to see with few deviations over the next couple of years, as long as nothing goes particularly weird, like somebody completely mad takes over in America or something like that. So as long as nothing like that happens, then we'll continue to see factors like that. These are the jobs that graduates do. So everything down to the other professionals are what we call graduate or the professional level jobs. And then these are the jobs that are below professional level. And we'd rather prefer to see graduates not going into those jobs straight away. Although this is a slightly grey area, because we know from other research people going into these roles progress quite quickly into those jobs. But the problem is with these jobs is these are the main front line of automation right now. These are the ones that AI is hitting really hard. So they are diminishing quite rapidly. Most graduates go into good quality employment, and of course, bear in mind that most of these graduates are 21 when they graduate and have, and you know, this is possibly the most depressing stat I'm going to give you all day, particularly if you're a relatively new graduate. They have 45 years of working life ahead of them. So you can't expect them to go straight into into their dream career straight away. In fact, we know. And you all know from professional, the work is very, very clear that most people take some time to reach the jobs that they ultimately settle into, usually 10 to 12 years. Most people don't settle into their final career until their 30s. We say there's no good such thing as a job for life these days. Actually, the dirty secret is most people over 30 have been in their current job for over 10 years. In the UK, most professionals, over 30 have been in their current job for over 10 years, and over 40% have been in it for over 15. So actually, there's no such thing as a job for life until you hit about 35 and have kids, at which point you're probably not going to change careers. Also, by the way, if you've not made it to the top by the time you're 45, you're probably not going to. Here with the good news. Anyway, so health is the main role because nursing is the most important job. Business and finance. Since COVID, we actually haven't seen a lot of changes in the kind of jobs that people do. Business, HR, and finance has gone up because hybrid working has been very effective. The arts has gone down because a lot of it was in SMEs and they got hit quite hard because they had less support. But in general, most graduates go into professional level employment. About a quarter for this cohort were in jobs below professional level employment. That's normal. Once it starts to get over about 27, 28%, we start to get really worried. A lot of the people who are in below professional level jobs have moved in and out of professional level jobs, and a lot of them are temping, for example. For this particular year, we saw large sets of rises in particular roles. What's interesting about these jobs, and the reason why I've listed them, is we're short of all of them. We don't have enough people entering any of these jobs. We had more people entering them in this cohort, and we still don't have enough. And the other thing is, these are the top 6 jobs for this cohort. Next year, when we see graduates recruiting, I will quite confidently assert that the top 6 jobs for graduates will be these 6. And we've not got enough people entering any of those either, even though in nursing cases, we've got tens of thousands of graduates entering those jobs. We're actually short 3 entire graduating cohort of nurses right now. Anyway, on to the meat of what I was going to talk about. Actually, I'm not going to talk in enormous detail about locational stuff because we've got the difficulty is we do loads and loads of work on this and we have absolutely tons, and I could tell you and have told people in the past how many graduates get jobs in Rutland and exactly what it is that they do. 90, by the way. Or in this cohort anyway. And exactly what it is that they do, local government mostly, and nursing. But this is more of a kind of example of the kind of thing that we look at. So the crucial thing to understand about the graduate labour market is most graduates don't work in London. Most graduates don't work in London, never have and never will. In general, in a given cohort of graduates, about a third will at some point work in the capital. I've done my stint. I did what a lot of people did. What's very common for graduates is I studied somewhere else. I moved to London for work. I actually moved down with my partner. Didn't move my partner there. We moved together. We're both from the north of England. I'm from Lancashire. She's from Yorkshire. Missionary work. We stayed until we wanted mad, unrealistic things like a house. And then we moved back north. So what actually happens is it peaks around late 20s and then starts to fall again in people's 30s. But London is simultaneously by far the most important graduate location in the UK, and also most graduates will never work there. In fact, graduate employment is extremely urban. Postgraduate employment even more so, but graduate employment is very, very urban indeed. And that's hugely important because if you're recruiting outside those big urban centres, it becomes progressively harder to recruit graduates. London is the most important graduate employment location. Most graduates do not and never will work there. Second most important is, depending on the data you're looking at, it's either Birmingham or Manchester. I'm from the Northwest, so obviously I say it's Manchester, and my decision is final. Sorry if you're from Birmingham. Anyone here from Birmingham? Sorry. You are better than Leeds, though, which is fourth. And then it's Glasgow, then it's Edinburgh, then it's Bristol, then it's Cardiff. But it's very, very concentrated in urban centres. So the proportion going to London did go up. We are seeing effects of hybrid working, but at the moment, nobody is collecting data on where people are doing their jobs from, which is a bit frustrating. This is where people's jobs are based and not where they're actually doing them from. And that's important because most hybrid workers in the UK have degrees. In fact, the large majority of hybrid workers in the UK have degrees. It's not quite the same the other way around. About 40% of people with degrees are working hybrid because, don't forget, nursing is the most important job, and it's quite hard to be a nurse on a hybrid working pattern. The other thing that's really, really important, though, is graduates tend not to move to places that they don't have existing connections to. So what will generally happen is graduates will do one of three things in this order. The first is they'll go home to work. Now, actually, what's most common for graduates these days is to go to a local university. So 45% of all graduates never move. They stay in their home region. And that's even true for London, because actually the thing about London is most graduates working in London are from London originally. Then the next most likely thing to do is they'll stay close to their university. Which, of course, as lots of people are going close to their university, going to their local university means they're staying close anyway. And then the third thing they do is they go to the nearest big city, graduate recruiting city. Because London is in the most populous part of the country, and for the southeast, which is extremely populous, that means for southeast and East Anglia and parts of the southwest, that means London. But if you're in the northwest, if you're a graduate from the northwest, you are significantly more likely to get a job or to look for a job in Manchester than in London. If you're recruiting in the northwest, most of the people who apply for your jobs will be from the northwest or have gone to university there. And that's an important thing to bear in mind when you're recruiting. If you're going to recruit in Leeds or Newcastle, you need to be looking locally, because that's where the people who are applying for the jobs from, because people are simply not moving across the country. They're not even really, particularly these days, moving in great numbers from London if they've not already got a connection there. So, if you're recruiting solely in London, you will be recruiting largely from a pool of graduates from the south and southeast. It's not always the same pattern, though. This is the small bit of audience participation. Here is a very common degree subject, one of the biggest. And you can see London is much higher than usual, very, very large, but also much higher southeast and Northern Ireland. Anyone want to hazard a guess what degree subject that is? The Northern Ireland is a clue. There are no prizes for this, other than my respect if you get this right, or my respect if you even try to answer. Anyone want to have a guess? Politics. It's not politics. It's a good answer, but it's not right. I love saying that. It's computing. It's actually the job. It's computer programmers, because Belfast is a hugely important IT hub in the UK. In fact, a hugely important European IT hub. Second most likely place for a coder to work in the UK after London. Whereas this, little London, tiny, tiny London, big southeast, big southwest, Scotland's big, the Midlands big. Anyone have a guess? It's a job. What was that? It's mechanical engineers, something we're incredibly short of. We produce about half the number we need, but London simply isn't a big hub for mechanical engineering, because you generally tend to need big sites. So it's not always the same, but it is interesting, and we can map all of this stuff. We have all of this data. Where are all the graduates? Where are they for the things that you want to do if you're recruiting specific areas? So, for the mechanical engineers, they tend to be where defence is. That might be quite big over the next few months, I fear. And they tend to be where all the big manufacturing locations are. So they're in the Midlands, they're in the Southwest, they're in the Southeast, although Southwest is largely is quite strongly. There's 20,000 people working right now to build Sizewell B, as they have been for about 15 years. So there's a lot of engineers there. And so, they're spread around the country in that way. Right, just to do a bit of what's actually happening right now in the graduate jobs market, so you're oriented. The jobs market in general dipped a little bit in 2024. It actually popped up. We actually saw a slight increase over Christmas. So as of this data is quite new, came out on Thursday. So we've got about 819,000 job vacancies in the UK right now. Very small. It's adjusted every month. It is the ONS say it's a drop, but actually it is an increase on their original adjusted figures for last month. So I suspect we'll see it went up a bit, but basically it's flat. We've got tens of thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of vacancies ongoing, unfilled vacancies in all of these crucial sectors, many of which you recruit into. They're all pretty much graduate level jobs, not necessarily for new graduates, in fact, quite a lot for experienced hires. But of course, as you recruit a senior project manager, their place is going to be filled by a less senior project manager whose role is going to be filled, And about 75% of these roles end up getting filled in some way or another at the bottom. We know that about 1 in 5 businesses don't have enough staff. This isn't recruitment difficulties. They don't have enough staff to do their job right now. So there is still quite substantial recruitment shortages. The CIPD are reporting more businesses considering redundancies, particularly in tech, though. But it's all very well saying there's loads of vacancies, but what if they're all in Tesco's? Well, they're not, actually. The majority of vacancies are, and have been for a long time, at graduate level. Most vacancies in the UK are for graduates. We've seen a slight narrowing of the gap, and I'll explain why in a minute, and it is possibly what you might think it is. Specifically over last summer, and very specifically, as we'll see in a moment, here in London. But in general, around 60% of vacancies in the UK, since we started collecting the data in a systematic way in 2017, have been in a graduate level. Spot COVID, and also spot the post-COVID bounce when everybody tried to recruit at once because they realised hybrid working worked. Took us 3 years to get through that. When you had all those recruitment difficulties, you couldn't get people and retain people. That was that. We're not going to see a labour market like that for a while. So don't get used to how things were then. These are new vacancies. So we can see in the latter part of 2024, actually there were more non-graduate vacancies coming online than graduate vacancies. Again, I'll explain why that is. But the graduate vacancies are harder to fill. So we've still got more actual vacancies. There's a mixture of things happening here, actually. Some, particularly in tech, have withdrawn from the market because they can't fill those jobs. There's no point advertising for civil engineering and surveying roles when there aren't any civil engineers and surveyors to recruit. No point recruiting for coders when they aren't there. So and those ads are expensive to keep in market, so they keep them out. This is the breakdown across England. Basically, this graph serves two purposes. Firstly, it's to show you something really pretty and say, wow, that's really pretty. But also, it's not actually very easy to see, but what's happened here is the gap has narrowed because London's got smaller. And that's it. London got smaller. So what happened? Well, we've got an ongoing demand for UK workers, a really, really powerful demand for UK workers. This is really, really good work out of the University of Warwick. It is, of course, as all predictions are, wrong. And Rob Wilson, who headed this research, has written a really lengthy report on exactly how wrong this is and the things that you can and can't do with this data, which is really candid. I like that. I think that's really useful. So this data is all wrong, but it's probably not very wrong. And you don't need to get too worried about the numbers. It's the directions of travel that's important. The large majority of majority of employment demand in the UK over the next 10 years is concentrated in these graduate level jobs. These are split into two roles. So the yellow bit is how much bigger, how many more people are going to be working in these roles by 2035, which, let me remind you, is only 10 years away. So we're going to need about 700,000 business IT and public service professionals by 700,000 more by 2035. Or in other words, we're going to need to recruit 70,000 of those graduates a year, every year for the next 10 years. And then on top of that, we've got what's called replacement demand, all the people who are retiring and need to be replaced. And generally in the labour market, that outruns expansion demand, which is this, by 3 to 1. So we need to be recruiting about 250,000 graduates into the business service sector every year for the next 10 years. We don't do that. That's actually about the entire first degree graduate cohort. The one area that's falling at graduate level is this: the technicians, and that's actually not because of less demand. It's because they're upskilling into the full engineer roles. But you can see that most of the demand at non-graduate level is being sustained by care work. That's the really big rising area. So that's why we have this phenomenal demand for graduates, why it's going to carry on being a phenomenal demand for graduates, and why that labour market is going to keep growing, why it's not going to get substantially easier to recruit them, and why that is going to be a big deal. Right, here's the bit I'm sure you'll all be excited about. I'm going to be the only person, I think, today to talk about AI. Am I right? No? You do surprise me. Here's what's happening. Here's what seems to be happening, and you've probably heard this before, but we can see in the data the effects of this taking place. As we know, we can't see a lot of effects on actual jobs. AI is not creating or destroying at this point, although it's anticipated it might. It's not anticipated to create or destroy many jobs at this point. But what it is doing, of course, is making things incredibly difficult for you because everybody's using it. And we can see that because AI writes better CVs and covering letters than most applicants, and it makes it really easy to do that, and you're being deluged with hundreds of thousands of AI generated applications, it's making it more expensive to do initial recruits. The sifts are harder. You're having to rethink your systems, and we know that, and we're trying to explain to institutions and to students the effect of that. And that is probably the reason for this dip, because it's cost over the summer, as we're reasonably sure that's the reason. It's costing so much more to do. Your cost per hire is going up, and so can't recruit as many people as a group, even though the demand is there, because it is difficult to do. The problem is, this is what we call for the philosophers amongst you, this is actually a real life, very interesting tragedy of the commons, because everybody is working in their own best interests with the best resources available to them. It makes absolute sense if you're a graduate to use AI because everybody else is, and probably you don't write a very good CV or covering letter yourself, and so they do. And they all know, and they know everybody else's, so they do. And then so you get all these applications in. So that's the issue that we're having right now. I don't see an easy way out of that right now at the moment. But we are aware of it, and we are trying to track it, and we are working with careers professionals and the employability and professionals in universities to at least get the applicants to do some basic work before they put the things through ChatGPT to work on their prompts to make these more professional, so that they stand out, and so that you can see. So instead of getting somebody who's just downloaded something off LinkedIn and fed it into a generator, at least you've got somebody who has some. You're getting applicants who have some basic aptitude at using these tools, and hopefully their CVs will start to get a little bit less samey. Their applications will get a little bit less samey. Predictions for 2025. God knows why I've done this, because who knows what's going to happen over the next few months. But we're seeing the economy bumping along. I mean, this has been the story over the last few years. I don't expect the graduate labour market to be as strong in general this summer as it was last summer or the summer before, but nor do I expect it to drop off a cliff. So I expect some of those figures you see to come down, but it's still not going, particularly if you're recruiting in hard to fill areas, it's not suddenly going to become really easy. I don't think some of the animus towards RTO or diversity that's coming out of the US is going to translate well over here. It's more embedded over here. The value is better understood, and the jobs market is more competitive here than it is in the UK. And so making it harder for you to attract candidates and making your candidate pool smaller is not likely to help in the medium to long term. So I don't think we're going to see very large pushes successful. You might see a lot of CEOs saying, oh yeah, we're going to do return to office, but what will probably happen is the same pattern has happened over the last few years, in that, well, we'll do return to office. 6 months later, nobody's back in the office. That's been the pattern here. And I suspect that's going to be the case. I do think we'll see some public sector hiring later in 2025. We're critically short of people in large areas of the public sector. So I do think that we'll start to see more hiring in health, education, in the police and probation, prisons, and probably defence spending as well. So that's it. That's all from me. Hope you found some of that useful. Have a good day. If you've got any questions, have we got time for questions?